You know, I've always wanted to be in somebody's life, to have a partner, to have, a girlfriend, to have a wife. And in order to achieve that, I would, generally speaking, go on dates and have relationships. And then I realized when I actually spent time by myself, alone, obviously, that's what by myself means, and kind of lived life like that for a while, maybe 10 years. Although during the time of not being with anybody, wanting to be with somebody, and still seeking and searching and all that. Talking to people, going on dates. But more time than not, really alone. Years, too, not talking to somebody in respects to wanting to get to know them like that. And then I realized, I'm really not happy. But it wasn't because I wasn't with anybody. It's just because I just wasn't happy just in general with me. And there was nothing that I did or that I regret or anything that I'm thinking like I don't like about me or a problem about me in general or even specific. Rather than realizing there's unresolved emotions and thoughts that are keeping me stuck in really in an unhappy way with who I am, with just being me and being happy with just being alive. And I've come to realize, well, that's really the problem that I'm facing. And it's good that I never really was with anybody, although I probably could have gotten married several times. Who knows, maybe they would be successful relationships or maybe not. Maybe I would have children out of them or not. Or I kind of feel like it would probably be the kind of relationship, because I've eventually been in ones like this where, it could be 2, 3 years, 4 years, and you're really not into each other. You're really not that into them anymore. It seems as if there's like this plateau of sameness going on. It's not as interesting as it was. You're not as excited or into as you used to be. And I think that kind of makes sense to a degree. And I think a lot of relationships end up in that zone where, of course, you go through your beginning stages of getting to know somebody and maybe doing a lot with them and behaving or interacting with them a lot differently than you would if it was 10 years later or whatever. And I like to say that's not healthy at all. I don't think that's good. Because I realized the reason why it was supposedly all good up front, even for the first 6 months or a year or whatever, or even several years of it being good. Why? Well, because I never allowed myself to really relax and be who I really am. That may sound a little weird, because if you're with somebody for many, many months or even years, how could you not be really you? Well, what I ultimately realized is I was always this version of myself that I thought was me. And I never really got to know myself as good as I know myself now, because I've been alone and I've been trying to realize how to live my life, and it's not easy. It sounds simple, like, what's so hard? Well, I'm not struggling immensely with being with somebody and that being the struggle, I understand how that could be the case, but it's not for me. Although I would prefer to be in that. But I realize, why would I want to be with somebody if I'm not doing well with myself? What kind of life is that? It would be the kind of life where you are with somebody and eventually the plateau of the relationship occurs, possibly more sooner than later or whenever, and you settle into this version of yourself that's the real you. That's the you that's not really an exciting person. That's the you that's really not that funny or into life. You eventually realize, if you're similar to me, that in order to really get to know that version that eventually you settle into, it's always been there. It's just a matter of time until you get to know that. But that's not going to really exist unless you're alone. Now, I guess you could see this if you are with another, but you need to realize this is what's causing the plateau. This is what's causing even the downward trajectory of the relationship. Now, we could blame the other and we could say, well, what about them? I'm not discounting that, but I'm not here to talk about another person. Because if you were in a good trajectory of who you are, you'd either make that relationship better somehow, or you get them to realize this is what the struggle is, or this is what the problem is, or this is what they're doing, or this is what you're doing, or this is what needs to be done, or this is how can we contribute to a better relationship. You'd be in that stage, because you'd realize this isn't good or it's not good enough. We're not looking for perfection. I'm not looking for perfection. I'm looking for just to feel good generally with the person I am with. But how could that really be the case if I'm not feeling that good? It's because in the beginning, you're not really yourself to begin with. You seem like you are. You act like you are, but you're not. Maybe you don't realize it. Maybe you might act different. You might talk different. Right? Just your thoughts are different. The way you speak and everything. And then you settle into this, so I'm not really happy, but I don't realize I'm not happy. And you could blame the other person. I'm not saying the other person's not to blame for any of it, but why wouldn't you stop it? Why wouldn't you fix it? Why wouldn't you change it? Why wouldn't you get out of it? Why wouldn't you do anything about it? That's the whole point I'm trying to say. If you were doing well, if you were feeling good, that's what a good feeling person would do. When we're feeling good, we look at life and we realize, I want this to be better. It's funny because when you're feeling good, in a way, you want whatever is going on around you to be good. To be better than just okay. And I'm not saying okay is bad. Because sometimes life is just okay, things are okay, well, whatever it is. But what I'm saying is, sometimes we ignore what's not good and we'll be okay with that. We'll say it's okay, it's not that bad, right? It's okay. When in fact, if you were feeling good, you'd say this isn't okay. So a person who's not feeling good is more likely to be okay with things. A person who's feeling good is looking for life to be better. And they're not trying to make it perfect. That's a person who is not feeling good. They're trying to do all this stuff that somehow makes life better, but life isn't, you can't really make life better if you're not feeling good. And if you think you're making life better and you're not feeling good, then that's an illusion. Because you're doing all this stuff or being a certain way or whatever it is that you're trying so hard with or you're trying to do, but you'll realize you're really not happy, so you weren't happy to begin with. It's just very interesting. When we're feeling good, we want others to feel good. We want the world to do better. We want to be more of like a person that connects to our emotions. We want others to connect to their emotions. We want others to do well for themselves, and we don't feel good if they're not doing well for themselves. And it's more so not a good feeling if it's someone we really know, or someone close to us, or someone we have a better relationship with. But in general, we're more vulnerable is the whole point. And more vulnerability leads to, I want things to be good. I want people to be happy, right? If somebody's not seeming like they're really not into life or not into, a good energy, you'd be concerned. And here's the thing, there's nothing you can do to change that. That person needs to realize this is where they're at, this is how they're feeling, and someone who's in denial will be like, oh, there's nothing wrong with me. Because they're so used to being like that, how could they think that's wrong? And that's the problem with that, at least. So the point of me saying this is, as much as I want to be with somebody, and as much as I think that would be great, and what's the point? I want to bring to them a version of myself that I can be with or without them, and a version of myself that I love being, and a version of myself that I want them to have for themselves. I don't want them to be me. I want them to be a happy them. And a happy them isn't consistent of anything that creates it other than them realizing they're not really that happy to begin with, and they find it within themselves and they work at that. To be more genuine, to be more authentic, to be more vulnerable, to be more so-called what we could say is themselves, as opposed to a version of themselves that they are. And there's so many compensation mechanisms people do that cause them to be the person they are. And what they don't realize is that's not really them. Some people try to just make people laugh. Some people try to act intelligent. Some people have to be right all the time. Some people, are so very passive. There's almost like no middle ground with like being like this very confident, happy, I love myself life attitude. And we're in a way coping with not having that with different personality traits. It gets us by. It makes us feel better. It helps us to avoid or to be more superior, as opposed to just not needing any of that, right? And all of those coping mechanisms could be actually helpful in life, depending on the circumstance, but not a way to adapt and become. That's not happiness. I can't imagine being happy. I could imagine being, some older person who is now sitting around family with my arms crossed and seem like I'm there, instead of actually happy and never noticing a difference. And if anyone was to mention it, I'd be like, what are you talking about? So that's why you can't really help anybody. You could point things out, but to a degree, because then they're going to resent you, or they're going to feel like, why are you judging them? Or, it's not going to allow them to have an opportunity. So what do? There's not much you can do. All I could say is if you work on yourself, you be around others who are hopefully working on themselves, and then that's the way you live your life. And those that don't work on themselves, and you're with somebody that's not working on themselves, then guess what's going to happen? You're going to continually to get happy, and they're not. And you may even be able to bring that energy into the relationship, and most likely you will, even innately, naturally, because if you become happy with who you are and your life, you're going to do things that resemble that. So don't be mistaken that you're happy when you have no passions. Don't be mistaken that you're happy when you really don't do anything with your life. So the happy person eventually in a relationship that's kind of like It's not good. Doesn't seem good. People don't seem happy. They act happy. Maybe they act fine out in public, and at home, one or both are just miserable. They don't really talk. They're not really engaging. They're not really interested in things. It's always like turmoil, and it's like, this bad energy. Well, that bad energy is there regardless. One person starts realizing that within themselves, and they want to be happier. I'm not saying you shouldn't be with the other person if this was the case. What I'm saying is, well, you might repeat this with another person. That's why if you are with somebody and you work on this within yourself, you'll realize the other person I'm with, that they're not happy with who they are. They're not happy with just being alive. They're not happy with just being themselves and finding themselves. And maybe somebody just doesn't even really know themselves. And that's completely normal. How many people really know themselves? Some people will say they do, but then why are you so miserable? Because if you really knew yourself, here's the thing. If you really knew yourself and you're living a life that kind of mirrors dysfunction, wouldn't you just say, yeah, I live like this, and why? But a supposedly happy person, which I'd like to say is a false sense of happiness, which is why they do like coping mechanisms. They don't realize it. They would maybe agree to that and do nothing about it. They'd maybe agree to that and give reasons. They'd maybe agree to that and say, this is just who I am. So there's something stuck within them that they're unaware of, and they're not able to be aware of. How could you be aware of something if you're unaware of it? So what are you going to do? That requires a lot of work. That requires a good therapist. That requires somebody to be patient with them and to be guided. And you can't do that. So what do you do if you're in a situation like this? Well, you figure that out. But ultimately, maybe the relationship just doesn't work. You try to make it work, but what are you going to do? I mean, it could work, but it could also not. The whole goal here is to really be happy. It's not about who you're with. It's about really who you are.